The Vanishing at St. Luke's, the 2013 mystery that haunts Houston. In the heart of Houston stands St. Luke's Hospital, a place built on faith, medicine, and miracles. But one summer night in 2013, that faith was tested by something science couldn't explain. A patient named Cassandra Reed vanished. No struggle, no witnesses, just a woman who walked out of her room and into nothingness. Security footage showed her sitting quietly at 2:18 a.m. At 2:20, she was gone, and every second between is still a void no one can account for. Rumors spread quickly. Some said she escaped. Others whispered of cold spots in her hallway, the smell of ozone, and lights flickering for weeks afterward. Hospital staff called it coincidence, but those who worked that night still speak of a strange hum in the walls, a vibration that felt alive. What if Cassandra didn't leave through doors we understand? What if something else took her, something that exists between pulse and silence? Here, fact and fear collide, and in that collision, the human mind begins to unravel. Welcome to Mystery Vault 80, where every story is a doorway, and some doors were never meant to be opened. Stay close, because once we begin, you might start hearing the hospital breathe too. Like, share, and subscribe, and let your curiosity be your compass as we step into the unknown. The hospital that never sleeps. Hospitals never sleep. Even at 2 a.m., they breathe. Machines hum like restless ghosts. Monitors flash in rhythm with fragile lives, and unseen footsteps echo down hallways that seem to stretch forever. At St. Luke's Hospital in Houston, Texas, the night of February 17th, 2013, began like any other. But by dawn, it would become a night spoken of in whispers. The night a man vanished not just from his bed, but from reality itself. Ethan Morales, age 36. A mild concussion from a car accident. Expected discharge, 9 a.m. He told the nurse on duty, "I feel better already." Then smiled a simple human moment, the kind that becomes haunting in hindsight. At 12:08 a.m., cameras showed Ethan walking into the elevator on the second floor. His hospital gown swayed slightly as he turned to press the button. He looked calm, almost serene. Then the footage froze mid-frame. The lights flickered in the ward. A nurse reported hearing what sounded like whispering through the intercom, though no one else was speaking. When the video resumed, Ethan was gone. The elevator doors opened to an empty cab. Security searched every level. The third floor, sealed for over a decade, registered a power surge at that exact moment. An old psychiatric ward, once closed due to structural issues, now silent and dark. But the real mystery began when they reviewed the security feeds. For a brief second, just before the footage cut out, Ethan's reflection in the elevator doors moved differently than he did, like a delayed echo. Some staff dismissed it as technical error. Others left their shifts early, refusing to return at night. As hours turned to days, rumors grew. Some said the hospital was cursed, that its old psychiatric wing was a doorway, not to madness, but to somewhere else. And if you listen closely on quiet nights, when the machines hum and the halls are still, some claim you can still hear the faint ding of that elevator, opening to a floor that shouldn't exist. The building that remembers. When a person disappears, it's the silence that comes first, the silence of unanswered questions, the silence of rooms suddenly empty. At St. Luke's Hospital, that silence became something else, something alive. In the hours after Ethan Morales vanished, police swarmed the hospital. Officers questioned nurses, scanned hallways, and replayed surveillance tapes. But what they found, or rather, what they didn't find, only deepened the mystery. Ethan's hospital bracelet was still in his room, his slippers placed neatly under his bed, the four removed cleanly, as if by trained hands. But no one saw him leave. No alarms triggered. It was as though he'd stepped out of time itself. The elevator that should have been dead. Investigators traced Ethan's last known location, the elevator to the third floor. Maintenance records showed it hadn't been serviced since 2002. It wasn't supposed to be functional. Yet somehow, it had moved between floors that night. Technicians later confirmed something inexplicable. The elevator's internal wiring was disconnected. There was no power source. No way it could have operated, yet it did. A nurse swore she heard footsteps above the ceiling panels that night, as if someone were pacing in the ducts. But the sound wasn't steady, it was erratic, like footsteps trying to follow someone or something. The past whispers back. By daybreak, Detective Reyes had already learned about the hospital's dark corner, the sealed psychiatric ward. Locals called it Ward M. It was closed after a fire decades earlier. Some said it was haunted. Others said it was condemned for what happened inside. Old blueprints showed that beneath the third floor lay a maintenance corridor that didn't appear on modern schematics. A tunnel leading to an older wing of the hospital that had been demolished years ago. Strangely, when engineers scanned the walls with ground-penetrating radar, they detected a hollow space behind the elevator shaft, large enough for a person to stand in. But when they broke through, nothing. Just a wall of untouched concrete. The unspoken theory. One hospital janitor, off the record, said something that froze the investigation cold. People say the hospital keeps its memories. Some patients don't leave because the building won't let them. And for those who still believe in science alone, the next piece of evidence would test everything they thought they knew, because Ethan's voice would soon be heard again, days after he disappeared. If this mystery has drawn you in as much as it did us, don't just watch, be part of it. Hit like, subscribe, and share your theories in the comments below. The truth hides in plain sight, and maybe, with your insight, we'll finally uncover what St. Luke's is truly hiding. Echoes in the walls. By the third day of the investigation, the atmosphere inside St. Luke's Hospital had shifted. The press had caught wind of the case, and rumors spread faster than any official statement could contain. Man vanishes from secure hospital ward. The headlines wrote themselves. But inside the hospital, something deeper was stirring, a mixture of fear and denial that hung thick in the sterile air. Patients whispered that the hospital was cursed. Nurses called in sick, and the security guards, once confident, began refusing to patrol certain areas alone. Detective Marlon Reyes, exhausted but determined, stood in front of the flickering monitor in the surveillance room, watching the same 3 seconds of corrupted footage over and over again. A faint figure at the end of a hallway. A blink. Then static. The search goes underground. When traditional searches failed, Reyes authorized a structural scan of the hospital's lower levels. Beneath the polished floors and clean corridors, they discovered an old service tunnel, one that connected to an abandoned maintenance wing sealed in the early 1990s. It was humid, narrow, and smelled of chemicals and rust. The walls were lined with forgotten equipment, old wheelchairs, and rusted metal beds covered in dust. One of the officers found what looked like a patient file wedged behind a pipe. The name had been scratched out, but the year was clear, 1987. Inside were 2 words stamped in red. Transfer denied. Reyes began to suspect that what they were dealing with wasn't a single disappearance, but a pattern spanning decades, hidden behind bureaucracy and silence. A strange discovery. As forensics combed through the underground corridor, they made an unsettling discovery. Fresh footprints in the dust, size 10, leading toward a dead end. But the most disturbing part? The footprints abruptly stopped against a concrete wall, as if the person had walked straight into it. Reyes had the wall scanned. No hidden passage, no cavity, just solid structure. And yet, on that same wall, barely visible under ultraviolet light, were faint streaks that appeared to be finger marks dragging downward. When samples were taken, lab results came back with an impossible match. Type O blood, the same as Ethan Morales. But the pattern didn't match a struggle. It looked more like someone had been pulled backward, slowly. Staff testimonies turned creepy. That night, more staff came forward. A janitor reported hearing intercom static in the sealed ward, even though that system had been disabled years ago. A nurse said her pager vibrated with a number she didn't recognize. Hashtag 301. Room 301 hadn't existed in decades. It had been removed from the hospital's layout after a renovation in 1996. Reyes ordered a search of the third-floor blueprints. And there it was, a faded annotation in the margin. Room 301 relocated, new wing pending. But there was no record of where the room was relocated to. It was as if the space itself had been erased. The voice in the tape. As detectives reviewed more surveillance archives, one technician enhanced the corrupted elevator footage. For the first time, the sound became clear. It was faint, almost like static between two radio frequencies. But after filtering, the words emerged, a voice, trembling and low. "It's not the doctor." A chill filled the room. When asked who might have said that, Samantha, the orderly who first mentioned the mysterious doctor, whispered, "That sounds like Ethan." But she swore it couldn't be, because according to the timestamps, that audio was recorded 4 hours after he disappeared. Detective Reyes sat in the dim light of his office that night, staring at the hospital's blueprint pinned to the wall. Every corridor, every door, every camera angle had been mapped and marked. And yet, the one place he needed to find, room 301, didn't exist anymore. Still, deep down, he knew one thing for certain. Something inside that hospital knew where Ethan had gone. It just wasn't ready to let anyone else find out. The hidden ward. The maintenance tunnels beneath St. Luke's Hospital were never meant to be seen again. According to the blueprints, this sublevel had been sealed off after an asbestos contamination scare in the 1980s. But as Detective Reyes and his team pushed deeper, they realized it wasn't asbestos that the hospital had wanted to bury. It was something else entirely. The deeper they went, the more the air felt heavy, metallic, damp, and suffocating. The walls were lined with pipes and faded medical charts. Faint numbers were scrawled across the concrete. 302, 303, 304, as if labeling rooms that no longer existed. Then they saw it. Room 301, faintly stenciled in peeling white paint, half covered by rust and grime. Reyes froze. The number from the pager. The voice on the tape. The ghost entry on the blueprint. Room 301 wasn't gone. It was right here, buried beneath the hospital. The door that shouldn't exist. When they tried the handle, the door didn't budge. It was welded shut from the outside, sealed as if to keep something in. Reyes ordered it cut open. As sparks flew from the metal grinder, the smell of burnt rust filled the tunnel. When the door finally gave way, a wave of cold, stale air poured out like opening a tomb. Inside was a small room, about 12 feet wide, lined with old equipment, a metal gurney, rusted restraints, a cracked mirror, and a single bulb flickering overhead. In the corner sat an old hospital bed, with tattered sheets still tucked in. And beneath those sheets, a name tag, E. Morales. The air turned still. The team backed away. The room had been abandoned for at least 2 decades, and yet that tag was clean. No dust, no mold, almost as if someone had placed it there recently. The records that vanished too. Back upstairs, Reyes demanded to see the hospital's patient archives. But when the files were retrieved, Ethan Morales didn't exist in their records. Not just missing from 1999, missing from every database. Admissions, discharge, even payroll from his former job. It was as though someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to erase him completely. When the detective pressed the hospital administrator, she hesitated before admitting something shocking. This isn't the first time. Over the past 3 decades, a handful of patients had gone missing from different wards, each under strange circumstances. Most were psychiatric cases. Each time, the official explanation was transfer to another facility. But there were no transfer records, no receiving hospitals, no family contact. And when Reyes compared the incidents, all the patients had stayed, at some point, in rooms linked to the 301 corridor. The patient log. Late that night, one of Reyes' officers brought him an old, water-damaged notebook found in a storage locker. It was handwritten, dated 1987, and marked property of Dr. Jonas Keller. Dr. Keller. That was the same name the orderly mentioned, the doctor who didn't appear in staff rosters. Inside the notebook were cryptic entries. The subject, dreams of corridors. Voices through static. Memory fragmentation noted. Patient believes he is being absorbed by the walls. The final entry read, Experiment suspended. Room 301 sealed indefinitely. Containment complete. The date, March 13th, 1988. The theory, when Reyes cross-referenced old staff records, Dr. Jonas Keller was listed as a neurologist, fired in 1988 after an internal investigation. The details were classified, but a nurse who once worked with him came forward anonymously. She claimed Dr. Keller ran sleep deprivation trials in the basement, using psychiatric patients as volunteers without formal consent. The theory was to study how long the human mind could maintain sanity in sensory isolation. But according to her, something went wrong. Patients began reporting hearing voices, seeing hallways that didn't exist, and describing being pulled into the walls during their hallucinations. Soon after, Keller vanished, just like Ethan Morales would 11 years later. Detective Reyes sat in his car outside the hospital that night, staring at the building's dimly lit windows. He realized something terrifying. The hospital wasn't just hiding a cover-up. It was sitting on a psychological time bomb, one that might never truly be contained. He took one last look at the name tag they found in the basement. The letters faintly glowed under the streetlight. E. Morales. It was as though the hospital itself refused to let him go. If this story made your heart race, it's because it's more than fiction. It's a reflection of what can happen when truth is buried under power and silence. Like, share, and subscribe to keep the investigation alive, because every view helps us shine light into the darkest corners. And tell us in the comments, do you think Ethan Morales was a victim of science, or something far stranger? The nurse who knew too much. Detective Reyes sat in a corner booth, clutching a folded napkin with a single name written in shaky handwriting. Nurse C. Langley. The message had arrived anonymously through the precinct mail. No return address, just a warning. She knows what happened in room 301. After 3 weeks of dead ends, this was the first new lead in the Ethan Morales disappearance. The meeting. When Langley finally appeared, she looked like someone who hadn't slept in years. Her hands trembled as she stirred her coffee, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. Reyes, you worked under Dr. Jonas Keller, didn't you? Langley, worked with him, until I realized what he was doing. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Keller wasn't running therapy sessions. He was conducting experiments. Patients were placed in isolation rooms, deprived of light, sound, and human contact for weeks. Keller wanted to rewire the human mind, to break the boundary between consciousness and reality. He believed the mind could leave the body, Langley whispered, that with enough deprivation, the patient could project themselves beyond the walls. Reyes stared at her, skeptical but intrigued. Langley leaned closer. Ethan was part of the new trial. They called it the Passage Project. The Passage Project. According to Langley, Keller had returned to St. Luke's under a new identity in the 1990s, working as a consultant. Using stolen grant money and influence within the psychiatric board, he secretly revived the Passage Project in the basement, targeting patients with trauma or schizophrenia. The program's goal was chilling, to observe what happens when the human brain experiences absolute sensory isolation, not for hours, but months. Some patients screamed until their voices gave out. Others fell silent and stared at the walls until their eyes glazed over. But the most disturbing cases were those who vanished without trace, leaving no blood, no fingerprints, and no open doors. We used to joke that Keller found a way to make people walk through walls, Langley said, her eyes welling up. But after Ethan, no one laughed anymore. The confession. Reyes asked why she never came forward sooner. Langley sighed. I tried, but every time I filed a report, it disappeared. Keller had friends in high places. He called them the benefactors. She handed Reyes an old photograph. 6 people standing in front of the hospital's psychiatric wing in the early 1990s. In the back row was Keller, smiling faintly. To his left stood a man wearing a gold hospital badge, the same man who now ran St. Luke's. They covered it up, she said. Every missing patient, every fake transfer, all signed off by him. When Reyes looked up from the photo, Langley was trembling again. Detective, you don't understand. The hospital doesn't forget. When Keller opened that door, something came through, and it never left. Before Reyes could respond, the diner's lights flickered. Langley froze. Her hand gripped his wrist cold tight. "If you go back there, you'll hear it too." Then she stood up and hurried out into the rain. That was the last time anyone saw Catherine Langley alive. The return to St. Luke's. Back at the precinct, Reyes analyzed the notes and photos she'd left behind. The handwriting matched the records from Keller's notebook, meaning Langley might have been in contact with him before she died. The next morning, Reyes received a call. Langley's apartment had caught fire overnight. No remains were found. Only a scorched patient file on her nightstand survived, marked E. Morales, subject number 7. Inside were notes about persistent auditory anomalies, voices instructing contact through reflective surfaces, and a chilling line at the bottom. Subject reports awareness beyond containment. Claims he can see Keller. The mirror test. That night, Reyes returned to the sealed tunnels beneath St. Luke's. The air was damp, almost breathing. He stood in front of the cracked mirror inside room 301, the one that had reflected nothing but static light before. But now, something shimmered faintly on its surface, almost like a ripple in water. When Reyes raised his flashlight, his reflection wasn't alone. Behind him, faint and distorted, stood a man in a patient's gown. Expression blank. Eyes open wide. Ethan Morales. The flashlight flickered. And then, nothing. The files that shouldn't exist. The flash drive found in Nurse Langley's burned apartment was old, wrapped in melted plastic. Forensics said it was unsalvageable. But Reyes didn't believe in impossible. He had it restored by a private tech contact, someone who owed him a favor. When the drive finally booted, 5 files appeared. No names, no labels. Just a series of cryptic titles. P01, P02, P03, P07, the passage key. The forbidden data. Reyes clicked on the first file. A grainy black and white video began to play. Time-stamped March 14th, 1999. Inside a padded white room, a patient sat cross-legged, eyes wide open. Electrodes covered his scalp. A faint hum echoed in the background. A distorted male voice spoke from behind the camera. Begin phase 3. Subject reports visual displacement. Then silence. The patient began to shake violently, his reflection in the metal mirror flickering faster than his body. At the 3-minute mark, the video cut out abruptly. When Reyes opened P07, his heart stopped. The patient's ID tag read, E. Morales. And in the corner of the frame, for less than half a second, Dr. Jonas Keller appeared, staring directly at the camera, as if aware of who would one day be watching. The government connection. Reyes dug deeper into the metadata hidden within the files. Each video contained embedded coordinates, not of the hospital, but of a government research facility outside Houston, decommissioned in 1986. He traced it back to a name, the Helix Institute for Cognitive Advancement. Officially, it was a neuroscience think tank. Unofficially, it was tied to psychological warfare contracts during the late 1980s, experiments involving sensory deprivation, hallucination control, and human endurance. One internal memo, recovered from the drive, read, Subject migration successful. Keller's findings integrated into Helix protocol. Project passage to continue off-site. That one line changed everything. Ethan Morales' disappearance wasn't a hospital cover-up. It was a federal transfer. The interview that never aired. Reyes tracked down a former Helix employee, a data analyst named Dr. Evelyn Markham. She refused to meet in public. Their conversation took place in her car, in a parking lot outside an abandoned strip mall. Reyes, what was Keller working on? Markham, not medicine. Not anymore. He called it cognitive displacement, the idea that under extreme conditions, the mind could detach from physical form. He wanted to make soldiers who could survive any environment, even death. Reyes stared at her, half in disbelief. And Ethan Morales? He wasn't supposed to survive the trial. But something went wrong. Keller said he made contact. That Ethan had crossed over. Crossed over, Reyes repeated. Into the walls, detective. into the space between perception and matter. That's what Keller believed. But the moment he said that, Helix cut funding and erased everything. The red file. Before leaving, Dr. Markham handed Reyes an envelope, stamped classified, /return to Department of Defense. Inside was a photo of a red binder labeled the passage key. Beneath it was a handwritten note in faded ink. He's not gone. He's waiting. That same phrase appeared in Keller's old patient logbook, written beside Ethan's name. When Reyes returned home, he poured himself a drink, staring at the files spread across his desk. One thing was clear. Keller's work had never been shut down. It had been relocated. And whoever the benefactors were, they'd gone to great lengths to keep it buried. The shadows move. At 3:04 a.m., Reyes' phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging. No name. No trace. Then, as he looked up, the reflection in his window shifted slightly, just for a second. A faint outline of a man standing behind him in the glass. But when Reyes turned around, the room was empty. The lights flickered, and the video files on his laptop, every one of them, began deleting themselves one by one. He yanked the plug, heart racing. Only one file remained. When he clicked it, static filled the screen, followed by the voice of Dr. Keller himself. Welcome back, detective. You found what you weren't supposed to. If the story so far has you questioning what's real, that's because truth often hides behind the veil of authority. Every missing file, every burned report, every silenced whistleblower points to something larger and much darker. Like, share, and subscribe, not just to follow this story, but to help expose what others want forgotten. And tell us below, do you believe Keller's Passage Project was science or something that crossed the line between mind and the unknown? The passage key. Detective Reyes arrives at the coordinates hidden in the last surviving video file, the one labeled the passage key. The rain hasn't stopped for hours. He parks the car, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through mist that smells like dust and oil. In front of him, a sealed compound, marked with faded letters, Helix Institute, Division B. The same name mentioned in the Keller files. Entering the forbidden zone. The main gate is chained shut, but the side access has been pried open, as if someone had been here before. Inside, everything feels wrong. Time itself seems to bend. Reyes steps through a corridor lined with flickering overhead lights. Old lab tables, medical equipment, and half-burned documents scatter the floor. He finds a door labeled Restricted, Authorized Personnel Only. On the other side, the temperature drops. The hum of electricity fades into a deep, hollow silence. Pinned to a corkboard, a red binder matching the one from the photograph. Stamped in bold. The passage key, Confidential Experimental Logs, 1998 to 1999. Reyes opens it. The first page bears Keller's handwriting. If consciousness can survive detachment, physical death becomes irrelevant. Morales achieved the threshold. The others failed. The wall holds the echo. The final entry reads only. He spoke again last night. Say my name. The room. At the far end of the hallway, Reyes finds a sealed observation chamber. On the door, P07, the same code from the videos. He pushes the door open. Inside, there's a hospital bed, rusted restraints, and an old cathode monitor flickering with static. And on the wall, written in what looks like dried rust or blood, is a single word. Still here. The monitor suddenly flashes to life. For a split second, Reyes sees a man's face, pale, vacant eyes, whispering soundless words. He freezes. Then the power cuts completely. The last witness. A faint sound echoes from deeper in the complex. Footsteps. Reyes follows them cautiously, light flickering against concrete. He turns a corner, and there, sitting on the floor surrounded by old charts and candles, is Dr. Jonas Keller. Aged frail, his lab coat torn and yellowed. His eyes reflect both genius and madness. Reyes, Dr. Keller, you're supposed to be dead. Keller, death doesn't apply here anymore, detective. We crossed that line years ago. Reyes steps closer, recorder running. What happened to Ethan Morales? Keller smiles weakly. He didn't vanish. He transitioned. The walls of perception are thinner than you think. He exists in the residual field, watching, waiting. Reyes demands proof. Keller gestures toward the corridor. You already saw it. The words on the wall. That wasn't written by me. The science of the impossible. Keller explains what he called the passage effect. The human brain, under extreme deprivation, begins to collapse the boundary between self and space. In that collapse, consciousness may project outward, imprinting itself onto physical surroundings. He's not a ghost, Keller insists. He's data, pure cognition, detached from the biological vessel. Reyes struggles to process it. Was Keller insane? Or did he truly discover something humanity was never meant to touch? The final revelation. Keller reaches into his pocket and hands Reyes a small metal key, the same one marked P07. If you open the chamber again, he'll respond. But don't listen for too long. Before Reyes can question him further, Keller begins to tremble violently. A loud tone fills the air, like feedback from a radio stuck between frequencies. Then, Keller collapses. By the time Reyes kneels beside him, the body is already cold. But the air feels charged, as if something invisible just passed through the room. On the monitor behind him, words slowly begin to type themselves. Welcome back. The return. Reyes stumbles out of the lab, clutching the metal key. Outside, lightning tears through the sky. He doesn't look back, not once. But as he drives away, the radio in his car turns on by itself. Static. Then a faint voice, low and distorted. Detective, I'm still here. Reyes slams the brakes, breathing heavily. The voice fades. In the rearview mirror, the silhouette of a man stands under the stormlight, motionless, watching. Truth doesn't always vanish. Sometimes, it waits in the places we choose to forget. If this story has kept you thinking, questioning, or chilled, then it's time to keep digging. Like, share, and subscribe to help uncover the untold. The stories buried behind hospital walls and classified files. And tell us in the comments, do you think Ethan Morales truly vanished? Or did he become something else entirely? The key returns. Detective Reyes stands at the nurse's station, drenched and pale. He's holding something wrapped in a white cloth, the small metal key marked P07. The hospital feels different tonight, colder, emptier, like the air itself is watching. Back to where it all began. Reyes walks down Ward C, the abandoned psychiatric wing sealed since 1999. His flashlight beam dances across broken tiles and peeling paint. He pauses in front of room 307, Ethan Morales' last known location. The door creaks open. Dust swirls through the air like ghosts of memory. On the wall, faint but visible under the beam. Still here. His heart pounds. It's the same handwriting as before. He pulls out the key. It fits perfectly into a lock behind a loose panel, a hidden compartment no one ever documented. The passage unlocked. The key turns with a low metallic click. A hidden mechanism slides open, revealing a narrow passage lined with brick and copper pipes. He steps inside. Each footstep echoes endlessly, as if the hallway loops on itself. Somewhere deep within the structure, a low hum vibrates, the same tone heard in Keller's lab before he died. Reyes records his notes into his phone. Sublevel tunnel connected to Ward C. Possible illegal lab access. Feels wrong, like walking into static. The deeper he goes, the less his flashlight seems to work. The shadows bend strangely, and the corridor feels alive, breathing. The shadow of memory. Halfway down the passage, Reyes hears faint whispers. Not words, but fragments of memory. A nurse's laughter. A patient's scream. A voice calling his name, his first name. He stops. The beam catches a set of old photographs pinned to the wall. Faded Polaroids showing Keller, Morales, and several unnamed patients. In one of them, Morales is smiling faintly. In another, he's staring directly into the camera. But in the last one, he's standing behind Reyes. Reyes drops the photo. The corridor goes dark. The lab beneath the walls. At the end of the tunnel, Reyes finds another sealed door, this one marked Observation Room B. He forces it open with a crowbar. Inside, a perfect replica of Keller's lab, but newer, untouched by time. Monitors hum softly, displaying distorted brainwave patterns. On one of the screens, a heartbeat still flickers. A digital voice suddenly speaks through the static. Connection restored. Subject, Morales, Ethan. The heartbeat accelerates. The lights flicker violently. Then on the far monitor, a blurry silhouette appears, a man's form, glitching in and out like bad video feed. Detective, you shouldn't have come back. Reyes stumbles backward, eyes wide. The voice is identical to Morales's, but layered, human and machine overlapping. We are what you left behind, it whispers. Now you open the door again. The echo. The entire room vibrates as alarms begin to blare. Power surges, equipment sparks. Reyes grabs the recorder, shouting, "This is Detective Reyes. There's something alive in the basement." Repeat, possible subject reactivation. The power cuts out. In total darkness, the voice whispers right beside his ear. "Detective, it's not just me." He runs toward the tunnel, light flickering. Behind him, the hum grows into a deafening roar, not mechanical, but human. Screams, whispers, echoes, hundreds of overlapping voices. As he bursts out of the corridor into Ward C, every door in the hallway swings open at once. The hospital wakes. Nurses on the night shift report lights flickering across the upper floors. Security feeds show static, then brief flashes of moving figures in empty rooms. The morgue alarms begin to ring. In the control room, a technician swears he hears someone whispering names from old patient logs. When Reyes emerges, his face is pale, his voice shaking. He drops the metal key onto the floor. "Seal it again," he mutters. "Don't let anyone else in there." The universal call to action. The deeper we dig for truth, the thinner the veil becomes. Some mysteries don't want to be solved. They want to be remembered. If this story kept you watching until now, then help us uncover more forgotten stories, the ones hospitals, archives, and history itself have tried to erase. Like, share, and subscribe to stay with us as we pull back the curtain on the unspeakable. And tell us in the comments, do you think Morales is truly gone? Or did Detective Reyes just bring him back? The hospital that remembered. Detective Reyes stands outside, his coat drenched, his face pale. He hasn't slept. He can't. Inside the hospital, chaos is broken loose. Patients are missing from their rooms. Security cameras loop strange footage, people walking backward, shadows moving without bodies, and a single line of text flashing across every monitor. The walls remember. Unexplained events. The hospital staff is in panic. Dozens of calls come in. Nurses reporting seeing Morales in hallways where no one has walked for years. Others claim to hear voices coming through the intercom. Patients who died decades ago, whispering for help. A janitor on the night shift collapses after entering Ward C, muttering only 2 words before losing consciousness. They're awake. The footage is reviewed by investigators, and what they see freezes them. Every door in Ward C opens simultaneously, just as Reyes reported the night before. But there's something else. For a split second, a shadow moves across the camera, a man's figure with no face, walking directly toward the lens. Then static, the mind that wouldn't sleep. As the media frenzy erupts, experts scramble for answers. Some claim mass hysteria. Others say carbon monoxide leaks or electromagnetic interference triggered hallucinations. But the autopsy report on Dr. Keller's remains reveals something far stranger. His brain tissue shows patterns of activity years after his death, like it was trying to think. And the electrical readings from the basement, where Reyes found the hidden lab, show energy spikes consistent with brainwave resonance, meaning something beneath Bellevue is alive, or at least reactive. Dr. Amira Patel, a neurologist brought in to assess the data, explains on camera. It's as if Keller's research reached beyond memory storage, into consciousness transfer. If he succeeded, even partly, the hospital itself could be carrying fragments of human thought. The building isn't just haunted, it's remembering. Reyes returns. Reyes, still shaken, returns to his apartment. The key is gone, the one he dropped at the hospital. But the whispering hasn't stopped. Late one night, his phone buzzes. No number, just a voice, faint, metallic. "Detective, they're not done with you." He freezes. The call lasts only a few seconds, but the audio waveform is strange, layered with interference, like a distorted recording of multiple voices. When analyzed later by technicians, one voice is clearly identified among the distortion. Ethan Morales. The building wakes up. At Bellevue, systems begin to fail. Elevators move without being called. Monitors flicker on by themselves, displaying hospital maps with blinking lights where no rooms exist. Security guards find old medical files stacked in perfect order on desks, names of patients who disappeared long ago, including Morales's. Then one night, power surges again. The hospital's entire lighting system pulses. Once, twice, 3 times, like a heartbeat. In the basement, the automatic generator activates, flooding the lower tunnels with light. And for the first time, the camera feed from observation room B reconnects. On screen, a single chair spinning slowly, and etched into the floor beneath it, written in what looks like dried rust, is one phrase. "Remember US." A message from nowhere. Reyes rushes back to the hospital, convinced it's all connected. Keller's experiment, Morales's disappearance, and the voices. He brings Patel with him for verification. As they descend into the tunnel, the sound of static returns, faint but rhythmic, like breathing through electricity. Patel records the frequency. It matches Keller's archived test logs from 1999. Then suddenly, her equipment spikes, and a voice cut through the static. "We never left, detective. You just stopped listening." The lights flicker. Walls tremble. Behind them, the corridor begins to close, brick by brick, as if the building itself is sealing its own wounds. They sprint for the stairs, bursting into the main ward, gasping, terrified. But when Reyes looks back, the tunnel entrance is gone. Only smooth wall remains. The universal call to action. Some stories are not about what we can prove, but what refuses to stay buried. If you've followed this far, you've walked with us into the dark heart of a mystery that still breathes beneath New York City. The hospital that wouldn't forget. A week has passed since Detective Reyes's last visit. The hospital claims to have sealed off the basement for safety reasons. But Reyes knows better. In his apartment, the walls whisper. The static from his radio bleeds into the sound of breathing. And every night at exactly 3 a.m., he hears the faint sound of someone knocking, not on his door but from inside the walls. The unsolved file. Officially, Ethan Morales's case is marked closed, presumed dead. The file contains nothing but fragments. Missing footage, redacted lab notes, Keller's half-burned research. But what stands out, what the camera lingers on, is a single line scribbled in pen across the last page. The body remembers even when the soul escapes. Reyes brings the note to Dr. Amira Patel, who's been reviewing Keller's neurosync experiments. Her conclusion is as disturbing as it is poetic. "Detective, if Keller was mapping consciousness through electrical resonance, it's possible he imprinted part of a human mind into the hospital system. Morales may not be gone. He may be stored." The final investigation. Determined to prove it, Reyes sneaks into Bellevue one last time. It's quiet, too quiet. The emergency lights buzz, and every hallway smells faintly of ozone. He follows the familiar static trail down to the sublevel, to the place where the walls first closed. The concrete has been patched, but as he shines his flashlight across it, a faint outline begins to emerge. A handprint. Fresh. He presses his palm against it, and the static roars to life. Monitors flicker on around him, showing security feeds from every floor, except one. Ward C. Instead of patients, the screens show looping images of Reyes himself, entering the basement, again and again, each from a slightly different angle, each time-stamped seconds apart. Time, it seems, is no longer moving forward. It's folding. The living archive. The lights explode to full brightness. In the center of the room, the old experiment chair sits upright, the one Keller used for cognitive resonance testing. Attached to it is a single headset, humming faintly. Reyes approaches, trembling. The device flickers on by itself, displaying words on the cracked monitor. "Welcome back, detective." He leans closer, and suddenly the sound of breathing surrounds him, overlapping with whispers that form a single coherent phrase. "You found us." The hospital seems to exhale. Every bulb dims. Every screen flashes a face. Morales is pale, frightened, yet aware. Then dozens more faces follow. Old patients, doctors, victims, all trapped in static, all mouthing the same word. Remember. The revelation. Patel, watching remotely from her lab, sees Reyes's body convulse on camera. His vitals spike. The system begins uploading terabytes of data, electrical impulses converting into raw code. Then, suddenly, silence. The feed cuts. When emergency teams arrive, the room is empty, the chair still warm. No sign of Reyes. But the monitor now shows 2 saved profiles. Keller _ 1999 and Reyes _ 2025. Both marked active. Aftermath. A year later, Bellevue Hospital announces another renovation. Ward C is permanently closed. All research from the Keller lab is sealed by federal order. But strange things continue to happen. New staff report hearing footsteps in empty corridors. Monitors turn on by themselves. And in the archives, every photograph of Detective Reyes has vanished, except one. In that one photo, taken before his disappearance, he stands at the hospital entrance, smiling faintly. And behind him, just barely visible in the reflection, is Ethan Morales, watching. St. Luke's still stands, spotless and bright, but at night, its windows reflect more than empty rooms. Some claim to see a faint figure walking the upper corridors, a woman in a patient gown who never quite turns her head. Every few months, alarms trigger in Cassandra's old wing without reason. Monitors beep, doors open by themselves, and the temperature drops just for a second. Was it a cover-up, a portal, or a haunting born from grief that refuses to rest? Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: St. Luke's remembers. And perhaps so does Cassandra. Here at Mystery Vault 80, we chase the echoes others ignore. If you've walked with us this far, thank you. Your curiosity feeds the light that keeps the shadows from winning. Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us what you believe. Was it science, or was something beyond it? Because sometimes mysteries don't just disappear. They wait, patient, unseen, and eternal, for someone to finally listen.